All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into the life of Lucy,
Uh-huh.
a woman whose story, it takes us from 1960s Havana
Wow.
to Miami Beach,
Oh.
and then a farm in rural Florida.
Right.
Talk about a plot twist.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is that we're working with a movie script treatment.
Right.
So it's like we're getting a sneak peek behind the scenes, seeing how the writer envisioned this character's entire journey.
It's like a blueprint for a whole life.
Yeah.
Full of potential and possibilities.
Absolutely.
So chapter 1, Havana Roots,
Mhm.
we are just dropped right into Lucy's childhood.
Yeah.
Close family,
Uh-huh.
lively neighborhood,
Yeah.
strong sense of Cuban culture.
Right.
And the script even mentions she was born in the early 1960s.
That detail is key because the early 1960s in Cuba was a time of just immense upheaval
Oh, yeah.
with the revolution.
Wow.
Imagine growing up in that as your backdrop.
Right?
You know, it probably instilled in Lucy a sense of resilience from a really young age, I would imagine.
You'd think so.
To navigate that kind of change early on that might prepare someone for all the curveballs life throws at you later on down the road.
Like history itself becomes another character
Yeah,
in her story.
exactly.
Speaking of characters, there's this detail about her grandmother living just a block away
Oh,
and a bustling park across the street.
that paints such a vivid picture of a childhood rich in connection.
Yeah.
Not just within her family, but with the entire community.
Yeah.
And this might explain the deep sense of belonging that Lucy seems to carry with her, even as her life takes these pretty dramatic turns.
Okay, so fast forward to chapter 2,
Okay.
Miami Beach in 1985.
Mhm.
Lucy's 24, fresh out of college,
Yeah.
and suddenly living this glamorous life.
Yeah, it's almost a classic American dream narrative, isn't it?
Is.
She meets this handsome, wealthy guy. They have this lavish wedding,
Yep.
the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
But there's this detail about Lucy becoming a successful executive at places like the Eden Rock and the Fontainebleau.
Wait, is there something more going on here than just a fairy tale?
Ooh.
That detail about her career makes me think there's this ambition that's bubbling under the surface.
Yeah,
Maybe she's not just swept away by the romance,
right.
but actively shaping her own destiny too.
I think you're onto something. It
Ooh.
reminds us that there are often these layers to a story,
Right.
and sometimes the most interesting parts are hidden beneath the surface.
Foreshadowing.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm even more curious what happens next. And spoiler alert.
Okay.
Chapter 3 takes us to 1990. Lucy's 30, and her husband, who's now enlisted in the military, is killed in action.
This is where we see the writer contrasting the previous chapter's opulence with the stark reality of loss.
Yeah.
It's a gut punch. And the detail about their last romantic night together just amplified the tragedy.
Oh, wow.
We're forced to confront how quickly things can change,
Right.
how fragile happiness can be.
It's a harsh reminder that life doesn't always follow the script,
Yeah.
even in a movie script. So how do you begin to rebuild after something like that?
Which brings us to chapter 4, and probably the biggest change of all. We jump to 2020, and Lucy, now in her 60s, has bought a farm in rural Florida.
Really?
She's raising miniature animals, participating in rodeos.
From stilettos to cowboy boots?
Exactly.
What do you think triggered such a radical shift? Was this about escaping the past?
The script mentions that she sees the farm as a gift from her late parents because the closing date coincided with her father's birthday.
Yeah, wow.
So that hints at this really deep emotional connection to her past. Maybe even a way of honoring her family while forging a new path for herself.
That's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if this was always a part of her, this yearning for a simpler life.
Mhm.
Maybe the Miami years were just one chapter in a much bigger story.
And that's what's so interesting about exploring a character like this, even through a script treatment. We get these glimpses into different facets of Lucy's personality, but it's ultimately up to us to imagine how they all connect.
It's like we're being invited to participate in the creative process,
Yeah,
to fill in the gaps and imagine Lucy's inner world.
absolutely.
So based on what we've seen so far, what stands out to you about her character?
Well, one thing that jumps out at me is this constant tension between embracing change and staying connected to her roots.
Okay.
Think about it from Cuba to Miami to the farm.
Yeah.
She's always adapting to new environments.
Yeah.
Yet there are these hints of her past woven throughout each chapter.
It's like she's carrying her history with her, but also allowing herself to be transformed by each new experience.
Yeah.
That takes a special kind of resilience.
Absolutely. And that resilience is something we see play out in different ways throughout the script.
Okay.
From navigating a turbulent childhood to building a successful career and ultimately finding solace in a very different kind of life. She's constantly proving her ability to adapt and overcome.
It's a powerful reminder that resilience isn't just about bouncing back from hardship.
Yeah.
It's also about embracing change and finding new ways to thrive. You know what? I think this idea of change and adaptation
Yeah,
might be the key to understanding Lucy's story as a whole.
I think you might be right. And that's what makes this deep dive so intriguing.
Yeah.
We're starting to see patterns emerge, connections between seemingly disparate parts of her life. But there's still so much more to unpack.
Exactly. We've laid the groundwork, but now it's time to dig deeper.
Okay.
Let's move on to the notes and brainstorming section of the script treatment and see what other clues we can uncover about Lucy's journey.
I'm ready.
Let's-
Yeah. As we're piecing together Lucy's life, it strikes me that her story isn't just personal. It's playing out against this backdrop of some major historical and societal shifts.
Okay, give me the big picture. What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Her childhood in Havana during the Revolution,
Yeah.
then moving to Miami in the 80s,
Right.
just as it's exploding onto the global scene, becoming this hub of wealth and culture.
Okay.
It's like she's riding these waves of change.
So it's not just about Lucy making choices, but about those choices existing within a specific time and place.
Exactly.
It adds another dimension to her story, doesn't it?
It really does. And then there's her move to the farm in 2020.
Right.
We can't ignore that this coincides with this growing trend of people being disillusioned with city life and seeking a simpler, more grounded existence.
You're right. It's like she's tapping into this collective yearning for something more authentic, something more connected to nature. And honestly, after the few years we've all had with the pandemic and everything else, who wouldn't crave a little peace and quiet on a farm somewhere?
I think you've hit on something really important. Lucy's story resonates because it reflects a search for meaning that's happening on a much larger scale. It's about how we navigate a world that feels increasingly chaotic and uncertain.
This is making me realize that even though we're talking about a fictional character, these themes are so relatable. We're all trying to find our place in a world that's constantly shifting.
Absolutely, and that brings us back to the power of stories. Lucy's journey, even in its unfinished form, it makes us think about our own lives, our own search for meaning. It's like holding up a mirror to our own hopes and anxieties.
It's interesting you bring up a mirror because one thing that struck me, especially with the move from Cuba to Miami, is how much the script hints at the complexities of the immigrant experience.
Yes, that's a layer we can't ignore. Imagine the cultural shift. A new language, new customs, a whole new way of life.
Yeah.
It forces you to re-examine everything, your identity, your values, everything.
It makes me wonder how Lucy navigated that. Did she face prejudice? Did she find ways to connect with other Cuban Americans? Does she hold on to her heritage? There's so much left unsaid, but it's clearly shaping her journey.
And that's the beauty of a good story. Those gaps invite us to think deeper, to bring our own perspectives and experiences to the table. It becomes a conversation, not just a passive observation.
Speaking of things left unsaid, what about Lucy's husband?
Oh yeah.
We get that he's handsome, wealthy, and patriotic, but the script doesn't reveal much else about him.
He's almost a blank slate, isn't he? We see him through Lucy's eyes, but we don't really get inside his head. What were his motivations, his fears, his dreams?
And what impact did his military service have on him, on their relationship? It's like his absence, especially after his death, becomes this huge presence in her life.
That's such an insightful point. His death isn't just a plot point, it's a force that continues to shape Lucy's choices long after he's gone. It speaks to the enduring power of love and loss, how they become part of who we are.
And that loss, combined with all the other changes she goes through, really highlights the theme of resilience and makes me want to go back and look for clues, those tiny details that might reveal how she copes, how she finds the strength to keep going.
I'm with you on that. Remember that detail about the park and the grocery store in her Havana neighborhood? They might seem insignificant, but they paint a picture of a childhood that was rich in connection and community.
You're right, those little things matter. It's like building blocks shaping her foundation. And it makes you realize how those early experiences might have given her the tools to deal with the challenges that came later.
Exactly. And don't forget that detail about the farm purchase coinciding with her father's birthday.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it reveals a lot about her motivations, her way of holding on to the past while still moving forward.
It's like she's finding ways to weave together the different threads of her life, even the painful ones. It's not about forgetting, but about finding a way to integrate those experiences into who she is now.
That's such a valuable insight, isn't it? It tells us that resilience isn't about erasing the past. It's about finding ways to make it part of your story.
I love that. And I think it connects back to what we were saying about Lucy's immigrant experience. She's carrying multiple worlds within her, different cultures, different values. And maybe that's part of what makes her so resilient, this ability to hold on to those different parts of herself.
I think you're onto something. It's like she's creating this mosaic, a blend of all these different influences that ultimately make her who she is.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So we've got resilience, we've got cultural identity, we've got the power of the past. What other themes are jumping out at you as we dig deeper into Lucy's story?
One thing that keeps coming back to me is this contrast between the different phases of her life.
Okay.
It's not just about physical locations, but about the energy, the pace, the values associated with each place.
You mean like Havana representing a more community-oriented way of life versus the individualistic, fast-paced energy of Miami Beach, and then the farm being something else entirely?
Exactly. And it makes you think about how those different environments might have shaped her personality or aspirations, even her definition of success.
It's like each chapter is a different experiment in living a chance to explore what truly matters to her. And it makes me wonder, if you could ask Lucy one question about her journey, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think I'd ask her, when did you feel most like yourself? In which of these worlds did you feel most at home, most aligned with your true purpose?
That's such a profound question, and it gets to the heart of what we're trying to unpack here, doesn't it? It's not just about the external events, but about the internal journey, the search for that place where we feel whole, where we feel like we belong.
Absolutely. And that search might take us through different landscapes, both literally and figuratively. It might involve embracing change, confronting loss, and even reinventing ourselves along the way.
And that reinvention can take unexpected forms, like, say, a former Miami socialite suddenly competing in rodeos. That detail still cracks me up, but it also speaks volumes about her willingness to embrace new experiences, even if they seem completely out of character.
I love that detail too. It reminds us that resilience isn't just about surviving hardship. It's also about having the courage to step outside our comfort zones, to try new things and discover hidden parts of ourselves.
Speaking of hidden parts, let's dive into a specific section of the script treatment that I found particularly intriguing: the writer's notes on the use of music and sound. It's like getting a sneak peek into the emotional landscape of the story. I love that we're talking about music because I think it really adds another layer of meaning to Lucy's story. You know, it's like a soundtrack to her life, reflecting all those shifts and transformations she goes through.
Absolutely. And the writer's notes suggest using Cuban-inspired music for those Havana scenes. Think vibrant street life, rhythmic dancing, like this whole cultural tapestry woven into the soundscape.
You can almost hear the energy and the warmth of her childhood just by imagining that music. And then for Miami Beach, the suggestion is these romantic orchestral tones. It's a complete shift in mood and atmosphere.
It really highlights that contrast we were talking about earlier, the warmth of community versus the allure of individual success. And then for the farm, the notes suggest these uplifting, earthy sounds, a return to something more grounded, more connected to nature.
It's fascinating how music can just mirror those internal shifts, those different phases of Lucy's journey. And speaking of shifts, there's one more element the writer touches on that I want to unpack: the visual style.
Oh yes, for Havana and Miami Beach, the suggestion is for vibrant colors capturing the energy of those places. It's like a visual feast drawing us into those worlds. But for the farm, the notes suggest a more muted palette. Warmer, earthier tones.
It's like the visuals are reflecting Lucy's inner state. The vibrancy of her early life, the sparkle of Miami, and then this return to something simpler, more authentic.
Grounded.
It's also intentional, you know, adding another layer of depth to the story.
And the writer emphasizes that the visual style should really showcase Lucy's transformation and inner strength throughout the film. It's not just about what happens to her, but about how she evolves in response to all those events.
It's like we're being invited to witness her becoming, to see all those layers of her personality being revealed over time.
Absolutely.
I think that's what makes her story so compelling. It's not just about the plot points. It's about this internal journey of growth and resilience.
Absolutely. And that resilience is something we can all learn from, right? No matter what life throws our way, no matter how many times we have to adapt or reinvent ourselves, there's always the possibility of finding strength and meaning in unexpected places.
It's a reminder that change is inevitable, but it doesn't have to break us. It can actually make us stronger, more open to new possibilities. And, you know, as we're talking about this, I'm struck by how much Lucy's story reminds me of the hero's journey.
Oh, yeah.
Those classic tales of overcoming obstacles and emerging transformed.
Yeah. That's such a great connection.
Yeah.
Think about it. She leaves her familiar world. She faces all these challenges.
Right.
She experiences loss and heartbreak, but ultimately finds this new sense of purpose and belonging. It's a timeless narrative arc, and it's why her story resonates so deeply with us.
It's like she's tapping into something universal, something that speaks to our own desire for growth and transformation. And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
That even in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty, there's always the potential for resilience, for reinvention, for finding our own version of happily ever after.
Beautifully said, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've explored Lucy's story from so many angles, unpacking the themes, the symbolism, the writer's intentions. But ultimately, the most powerful part is that it leaves us with this sense of hope.
Yeah.
A reminder that we all have the capacity to overcome challenges and create a life that's truly meaningful to us.
So for our listeners out there,
Yeah.
we encourage you to keep reflecting on Lucy's journey. What lessons have you learned? What questions are still swirling in your mind? And how can you apply those insights to your own life, your own search for meaning and purpose?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Just Like Lucy. We hope it sparked your imagination and left you feeling inspired to embrace change, to cultivate resilience, and to write your own extraordinary story.